right? Valiant Thor came with Commander Dawn with 2 N's because we got to keep it space age, and I forget the name of the woman, but there was a woman that accompanied them. Now I sat down and I thought to myself, okay, I'm an alien from Venus. I'm an alien, not from the Earth. I'm from Venus. Why would I name my son Valiant Thor? Why would I name him Brave God of Thunder? I mean, it makes no sense at all. But apparently there's evidence that he checked into the Pentagon, that he went there and he met with them for multiple times. So why would I name my kid Valiant Thor? It doesn't make sense. The other reason that I think that they had... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The other reason that I think that there's a strong likelihood that this whole idea that they had UFOs is real, for me, came from the Betty and Barney Hill abduction. Now, typically when you hear about the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, it's very well documented. Very, very well documented. And they hypnotically regress them multiple times. And they used very good hypnotists. This is not parlor tricks kind of stuff, right? Well, there's a problem. In the first, and everybody knows the idea is that UFO comes down, car stops, they get out, and suddenly they're in a UFO and they see a star map and then they're released. And they were tested and experimented upon, etc. What actually, in the very first hypnotic regression, the very, very first one, Betty and Barney describe a very similar series of events. Barney gets out of the car. UFO has landed in front of him. Barney gets out of the car. He's scared. He doesn't know what's going on, right? He carried a .45 under his seat. He opens fire on the UFO, which seems rational if you're scared and you think they're going to kill you. And he shoots at him, right? Eventually runs out of ammo. They do something. They incapacitate them. They take them aboard the ship. He describes seeing people running the ship that were in black jumpsuits with silver piping and peaked caps. He said they looked like Nazis, and he had fought in World War II against the Nazis. He had a very good understanding of what they looked like, and he described them as being Nazis. I believe they also both said that they were led on a tour of the ship by a red-headed Irishman with a German Shepherd, right? Now, this is very important. So a lot of people are like, well, that's an indicator that it's just insane, because how could there be a red-headed Irishman on a UFO with a German Shepherd when it's from Zeta Reticuli, right? What people don't know is that during World War II and leading into World War II, the Irish Republican Army was fighting the English for a very long time, and they actually were supported by the Nazis in the 30s and the 40s, to the point that they regularly sent people from Ireland, Northern Ireland, back to Germany to be trained. And there was a fairly large, not actually huge, but there was a group of Irish Republican Army soldiers that left the IRA and actually fought in the SS, because the SS had this they had a group of people that were kind of from, other countries that would fight for them. And they even fought, I believe, in the Condor Legions in the whole Civil War in Spain. Well, so to have a red-headed Irishman on board a aircraft that's operated by Germans would not be common, but it's not insane. And a German Shepherd is a German Shepherd, The other thing that's interesting about that experience, right, is the star map, the Marjorie Fish star map. When you look at the star map, the Earth is at the center, and then radiating out from the Earth are a series of lines that seem to indicate transit routes between various stars. Okay. The problem with that is that that's a very ethnocentric thing, meaning that that the way you make maps and you do cartography is very much related to where you're from.
Okay, now I think my weekend host is calling. And is it okay if we bring him on for a minute to ask you a couple questions?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael, are you there? Hey, Michael, are you out there? Hey, Michael.
Yes, hello, Gary.
Okay, well, you're connected.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, man, Joe, this is a great opportunity here to talk to a guy like yourself that has done pretty much everything here, writing and directing
No.
and
Wrong guest tonight.
Oh, okay.
It's okay. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. You want to go ahead and tell Michael who you are, and then I think he's going to be a little embarrassed. No, what happened? I will say this. What happened today, somebody, namely me, copied and pasted something. I got sidetracked, and I quickly removed it right after I noticed that you clicked on it. I put the wrong day's guest on. I apologize for that.
Okay, well,
I do
get me up to speed.
I do secret space programs.
Oh, that's
so
right.
My
Is this Olav?
name's Olav. Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
Well, I know you. I know you, Olav. You're quite a character yourself. So, can you tell me how you got into this whole idea of the secret space program, and what tipped you off? There was something like this going on?
Sure. So, like everybody else, I started with UFOs. Mm-hmm. And I had an experience with UFOs. And I wanted to know the answer. And for a very long time, like many people, I thought everything's aliens. And over time, I started to doubt that. And I had always been an avid follower of aircraft, and I love planes, and I started to look at some of these planes that they were talking about in things like aerospace, these aerospace magazines, and I started to realize that I think a lot of the vehicles that we were seeing were not necessarily UFOs, or UFOs because you can't identify them, right? But they're not alien; they're built by us. So once I started to do that, the kind of shine of the alien thing wore off. And I had always been obsessed with this TV show from the 70s called Alternative 3. Mm-hmm. And in Alternative 3, the first few times I watched it, I thought to myself, well, this is funny. It's very kitschy, and it's a mockumentary. And I thought to myself, well, this is BS, and I've seen these guys in various, funny enough, the guy who plays the Buzz Aldrin stand-in, Bob Groden, who was an astronaut, and he had seen UFOs on the moon and all this stuff. He was actually in at least one episode of a British TV show called UFO, and he was a pilot for Shadow, which was this international organization that fought the UFOs, right? And so I'd seen him in that, and I'm like, well, this guy's just an actor. But one day, I don't know particularly why, but one day I woke up and I said to myself, well, for being a mockumentary, this thing is very specific. They're very, very specific about a lot of things. And I had read what other people had written about Alternative 3, Vladimir Tarjitsky and others. And I thought to myself, if this thing's real, right, like they claim it is, to pass the smoke test, then the things that they talk about should be real too, right? And so I gave myself a very simple objective. There's a sequence where this guy, Professor Ballantyne, who's kind of like the scientist of the show, is walking with a guy named Tim Brinton, and Tim Brinton was a television presenter, and he had actually left being a television presenter to be an actor, and then he went back to being a television presenter. And they're walking down this hallway in this mythical college, right? And Tim Brinton's asking, when did it all start? And I haven't told you what Alternative 3 is about, but when did this whole Alternative 3 thing start? And basically, when did the secret space program start, right? And so the guy responds, well, there was paraphrasing, there was a meeting in the late 50s, and basically that the outcome of the meeting was disastrous, and they figured out that we had a huge problem, and they needed to try and find a way to fix it or mitigate it. And I said, okay, that's all I need to know. Late 50s, some sort of meeting, I think it was the American Chemical Society. Something happened, big hoop, brouhaha, we're all screwed, right? That should be pretty easy to find. So I went through the meeting notes of the American Chemical Society of the late 50s, and I finally found what I think they were talking about. And basically what had happened was that there was a guy from Scripps who had done a pioneering study on phytoplankton. Now, when we're taught in school about how oxygen or how the atmosphere works, we're told that the trees, of which I'm standing next to one, the trees and the plants and the phytoplankton scrub the carbon dioxide from the air. Okay? And this guy, Roger Revelle, had gone out and done a study of how much CO2 the phytoplankton were actually scrubbing. And what he determined was that they were scrubbing in the late 50s. They were scrubbing half of what we thought they were. Okay? And so, yeah, so his quote, he has this insane quote where it's something to the effect of, we have launched ourselves into an experiment, the scale of which we could not even imagine. And he basically outlined a scenario where we could not keep up with industrialization. I mean, this is way before the arguments about climate change and global warming or anything else. This is the late 50s. And he said, there's no way we can keep up with the industrialization of the 50s, let alone now, keep up with the carbon dioxide scrubbing. So what I did is I went back and said, okay, there seems to be something there. So then I went through the three alternatives. And basically what the three alternatives were is that number one was to blow a hole in the atmosphere and vent the carbon dioxide into space. Number two was to build bunkers to wait out whatever catastrophic ecological collapse would happen as a result of this, right? The greenhouse effect or whatever. And the third was to leave and to go to Mars, okay? And so I set myself another goal. I said, okay, I'm going to find these things. And so the first one, okay, blowing a hole in the upper atmosphere. Sounds insane. The first time I really sat down and thought about it, I thought, this is nuts. Who in their right mind would even comprehend that could fix the problem, let alone spend money to actually try to do it? And what I realized is, okay, I stepped back. I said, nope, I'm thinking too hard. Just go find it. And so what I found was a thing called Operation Hardtack Argus. They took a fleet of ships down to the South Atlantic. They fired, I think it was the South Atlantic, they fired a couple of missiles up into the air and detonated nuclear weapons at high altitude, the highest nuclear detonations ever in the history of anything. They did it a couple of times, and they were supposed to simulate or create this thing called the Christophilus effect. This guy Christophilus scientists had theorized that if you detonate a nuclear weapon at high altitude, it will create an artificial Van Allen radiation belt. Well, when they did this, they classified it. It was like classified up until like the 90s. I mean, they buried it. And massive fleet, very high-tech ships of the time, and they did it. The Soviets did it too. We weren't the only ones. The Soviets did it as well. So, okay, I found the answer to alternative one. Alternative two, build bunkers. I don't need to tell you we build bunkers. The size and the scale of the bunkers we build are insane. I don't think I need to convince you of that. Then the third option was to go to Mars by way of the moon. And, that's where you really get into the whole secret space program thing, that it's like, okay, if we're going to go to Mars by way of the moon, better have ships, better have a moon base, better have some places on Mars. And in doing that, I found this very bizarre photo of this thing on Mars. And I have a kind of joke that I play on people. So I show them this picture, and in the book and whenever I speak, I always put the URL. So you can go download it from the government and see that I'm not lying. This thing's really there. And so I show them a photo of this thing, and I say, where is that? The most common answer I get back is that it's a house in Malibu, right? And I mean, it's very clear. We're not talking, it's wind eroded and tore up and, crystal spires or anything like that. This is very clear. It's got a triangle with a box on it. On top of the box is a dome. The dome is dark. The rest of it is light. It's perfectly smooth. It's built into the side of a cliff. It sticks out like a sore thumb. I mean, it just does not look like anything else. It looks like a building. I said, aha, I found it. I found the thing on Mars. The moon, there are a bunch of photos of things that might be moon bases, tractor marks. There was projects in the late 50s, early